glad we're talking inside today rather than outside. I'm looking out my window thinking, really don't want to be out there today, I've got to be honest. And I love fishing in most weather. I'm like, yeah, don't fancy that. Don't fancy the pouring rain.
No, and that's the reason we've done today. We thought, what can we do instead of being out in that rain?
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, didn't fancy that at all. So we've got a bit of a lunchtime live for everybody to enjoy. So if you're eating your lunch or not, or watching us back or whatever it might be, great. And me and Jake have got a few topics in mind, haven't we? But we can people can put their questions on. Jake, is that the crack?
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully, I'm guessing it'll build up. Hopefully it will. Hopefully some people are wanting to come to see us. I'm guessing just about now they're all getting a little advert at the start of the video, no doubt.
Brilliant. Right. So we'll be a little bit delayed, won't we, with questions and what have you, and responses.
Yeah. So let's start. Let's start with what you're up to at the minute. So where's your fishing taking you? So you've just come off the back of the European Feeder, what we call it, European Feeder Champs.
Yeah.
At Barston Lake, coming off the back of a brilliant team performance there, brilliant individual performance there, and then off the back of that, where is your fishing taking you, and where are you going over the next couple of months?
It's a really interesting time of year, I think. For me, I love this time of year for fishing, because everywhere, I always feel like fish are still really feeding well. It's the fish start to suffer a bit, which tends to be, we might get an odd frost, but not loads until sort of December time. So I really like this time of year. You can see it in the weights, Jake. Places are still fishing really well. They've not sort of dropped away yet, so it's a good time to get out. I think there's been a bit of a booming interest in like commercial silverfish competitions.
Yeah, definitely.
It's something that I've always done. It's not something that I've exclusively done last year. It's something that I've loved doing, but there's really like a flurry of interest in it at the moment. And got to be honest, I feel like it's gone a little bit early. I think there was quite a few qualifiers in October. I've been on one at Makins, which is a great fishery. I hooked like £200 a carp.
I've said this quite a lot of times, and I've said to, like, obviously I'm good mates with, and in the media side of the trade, to be fair, we're all good mates. Everybody who's in and about that, we're all good mates. And I've said to a lot of them, like, look, just be careful. It's just been summer. Stop trying to push winter silverfish fishing when it's gone. Yeah. It's like we're missing autumn, which is the best carp and F1 fishing time of the year, in my opinion. I
could not agree more. Honestly, that's my strong opinion. I went to Makins. I had 1915 of bream, only about like 15 fish.
Yeah.
But I had £200 a carp that day. I didn't enjoy myself at all. Neither did anybody else on my bank, because we all hooked lots of carp and they didn't count.
Yeah.
It was, if we'd have fished like a natural baits carp match that day, it would have been brilliant, which is what I would love to see from this window, which is what we've just done at Barston, Jake.
Yeah.
Like that European Feeder Cup was a natural baits carp bream F1 competition. Caught 100 kilos, 220 pound of carp and F1s. Brilliant fishing. And I just feel like I always used to go to an odd silverfish match at the Oaks, and they always started on the 1st of December. I think they started a little bit earlier last year, but for years and years, he started on the 1st of December, and they ran until the end of February. And that, for me, is the 3 months of commercial silverfish fishing. December, January, February. They're the months where I believe that
you get the best sport, don't you, for a start?
Yes, because carp at that point, if I was going carp fishing tomorrow, I'd be fishing method feeders, bomb and pellet, tapping in hard 6 mils, definitely 100%. Whereas if I'm going carp fishing in December, I'm chucking a bomb and bread, I'm flicking in an odd grain of corn.
You're hoping for a passerby or chucking it on one's nose, aren't you?
That's more important, a passerby. Whereas at the moment, carp are just coming to feed. So, and when I looked at, and I've got a lot of support for the guys running the comms, but take the Angling Trust one. That I'm so pleased that they've set up that competition. But their events finish in December. and January and February there isn't any. So it feels like it's gone a bit early, like you say. If it was moved back a bit, because that'll be the focus of my fishing. But this is an in-between time for me. The European Feeder Cup was amazing, but I'm going to fish an odd couple of winter leagues. I'm going to go on an odd qualifier, but I'm accepting of the fact that really I want to be still fishing for everything at the moment. I don't want to be ignoring these amazing fish like F1s and that. We had I went to Riddings the other day for a bit of filming and that, and the fishing was unreal, like goldfish and F1. It was some of the best fishing I've ever seen. It was just such, I thought, wow, what a day's fishing. But in a silverfish match, you'd have been chucking them back left, right and centre. So, I think that would be where my fishing's at the moment. I'm really looking forward to the Winter League this weekend for Drennan Blacks.
Yep. So are you on the Staney at the minute?
Yeah, Staney. It's the last round this weekend. It's 6 weeks in a row to allow people to then go on to other leagues, which is a nice little thing they do. And then I shall start fishing Hallcroft winter pairs with feeder masters. Obviously the feeder one, I'm going to look to do the Angling Trust and the On the Flyer commercial silverfish competitions. Yep. And really, after the last God knows how many months of running around like a lunatic, I just tried to ease it up. I'm very fortunate that I've got an opportunity to go on odd sort of 2-day festivals that they get run and odd qualifiers during the week. So I just tend to ease it up a little bit while it's cool until the campaign for the Winter League final will start in February time. So it's a nice time of year.
Your matches on the Staney at the minute, are they part of the Angling Trust Winter League? Are they your qualifiers? So yours, because we're up to about round 3 now, but we've had a cancellation on one round when the river was flooded. So you're just a few weeks further along that line. And how are Barnsley currently doing in that?
Barnsley are winning the league at the moment.
Yep.
But Ossett beat us last week on the canal. It's the last week this week. They're 3 points ahead. So barring a catastrophe, we should be okay. But that Winter League I haven't fished any, Jake, because I've been doing the European Feeder Cup and what have you. So I can't wait to get there this weekend. That league is unbelievable. There's Ossett are in that league. Preston Innovations Northwest are in that league. There's a new team formed, Wakefield team, which has got outstanding anglers in it. Daiwa Dons. I think it's 10 or 11 teams now.
Yes,
really, really strong.
And how many qualify from that? Will that be like a three teams or 4 teams?
4.
Yeah, because it's a good league, isn't it?
It's a really good league, and obviously there used to be 2 or 3. When I first moved up here, there was 3 or 4 leagues that almost shared venues. It was that insane.
Yeah.
But it's good to see. Let's say most people, the maximum travelling for most people is an hour, and you've got a fantastic league. And I think that winter leagues will evolve to that over the next 2 or 3 years. I think it will evolve to, rather than having 4-team leagues, I think that's what happened with ours. We had a 6 or 7 team league and a 5-team league, and they've combined together. Now we've got like a super league, if you like.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. It's good to see on the natural venues. Obviously, I'm down in the southwest. You're up in the northeast, sort of. Obviously, that's where your league is sort of based. And the natural venue scene in both those areas of the country, and even in the northwest, the canal guys up there, and the rivers that are up there as well, the natural venue scenes seems to be doing really well again. But whether I'm tainted from the area that I live in, but it seems to be that there's some really strong leagues, and it's doing really well.
It's great. It's brilliant fishing. It's the Staney this weekend. There was double figures. Nearly half the people competing had double figures, maybe more, of roach and little skimmers, and just brilliant fishing. I actually think it's better. I think the fishing over the last 5 years on the Staney has been incredible, and I think back to like 20 years ago where the number of people doing that sort of fishing was huge, and what it would be now. The fishing would be, I think they'd be coming from miles around to fish it. It's that good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to see, isn't it? It's great to see people's enthusiasm for it. So yeah, I just got one of those, and then I'll be commercial silverfish fishing really for the next couple of months once you get a few frosts.
Yeah, definitely. The commercial silverfish scene is brilliant in my opinion. They just went a little bit early, but the fact that there's so many of those matches going through a time of the year where people don't get that motivated to go fishing, but those matches I think have sort of reinvigorated people to go, I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to get bites. Gary Rogers' league, the on the flyer matches, and then the Angling Trust Silverfish, I think are two great competitions to target in that way. Plus, then the amount of open matches that are doing the same sort of thing. Well,
that's the other thing I was going to say. You then start to see people organising their own. So bigger qualifiers aren't for everybody. They don't want to drive around. But you'll see people. Well, we used to fish a local one here at Syke House. That's got 20 odd people on. Messinger will have 20 odd people on. I noticed one down south the other day, Floatfish Farm. That's the same. Because people want to have a day's fishing in the middle of winter, and obviously that teams of 4 at Hallcroft, Jake, which is silverfish only, is 80 pegs. That's an any method one, and it's great to see. And I think outside of the big comps, even if I was a club, maybe clubs should be in the winter months considering having their having some silverfish only days as well, because I think they find some remarkable fishing. It's really, really good.
Yeah, definitely. Right, let's move on to a few questions, guys. Just keep firing your questions into the comments, because we'll get through them in between some chats about just general fishing. Right, Lee Garner has said, your go-to ground bait mix for the winter on a lake for silvers, cage feeder fishing.
I'm going to say that I don't think there's a lake in the country, commercial or otherwise, where I wouldn't be thinking fish mealy based. I've done this recently in a couple of features, Jake. Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal, which is the mix that we created earlier on in end of last year really. Is a mix that I've used all year. I've had unbelievable success with it, but it's ground a little bit coarser than like your F1 darks and your F1 greens. So I put it through a pinky sieve, and it finds it off for winter, because I believe that the ingredients are what I want.
So just for reference, a pinky sieve, so the green Preston Riddle.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's it's like 3 mil or something like that. But it might even be fine. It might be 2 mil, because I'm pretty sure that it's about a 2.5 mil grind. So I think, whereas F1 and that is like a 2 mil grind. So I just want those chunkier bits of pellet out of it. But I know that the flavourings and the fact there's a high content of black expander in there, and the sugars and the salts and everything that we've done is spot on, and it's caught me so many fish. I just don't need the meat that I need. So for me, if I pass that through a finer sieve, that's great. If you're worried that your venue is really, really on the weak side of fish meal, you can bulk that out with maybe some F1 green, which is something I've done quite a bit. You wouldn't need to sieve it because it's already fine enough to go through. Or even maybe some sweet skimmer. So you could go even further still and add some sweet skimmer into it to weaken it down. But certainly for the next 6 to 8 weeks, we did some filming last week, Jake. It'll come out later on this year. It was brilliant, and I used sieved off Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal. Oh my God, it was brilliant. I had a brilliant day's feeder fishing.
Where was that one at?
Mixed. Pardon?
Where was that one at? You can't tell. Okay.
Secret, Jake. There's no way I can possibly reveal that information. It rhymes with Hiddings, just go there. So
was this the Christmas special? Was it?
Christmas special?
Okay.
Brilliant. It was brilliant, and I'll tell you now, boy, did they love it. So, and for me, any lakes where you go, that's the sort of thing that I will look for. And I fish Hallcroft throughout the winter, and literally, me and Will Freeman, who's my partner, I've just told him we're sieving off that mix. That's us until something else happens. Until maybe if it's super frosty, then it might get a handful of sweet skimmer in it. That's it. Yeah. So that's me.
Brilliant. That should cover you there then, Lee. Right. Mark has said, basically, is the conker something that you would fish at this sort of time of year?
Conker? My God.
It's something Andy Power does quite a lot.
Right, does he? Right, what's that, moulding ground bait round a pellet?
Yeah, so you can do it with paste or with a pellet. So it's just, basically, Andy Power tends to use a bit of pro paste because it's sticky and it's like that in between, like just a ground bait but a high fish meal. So it is basically a pellet wrapped in something, ground bait or paste.
It's not something that I particularly do. I think I never like to comment on something that I don't have a lot of knowledge in. When I fish to matches at Lindholm, and it tends to be getting your feed right. And once November goes, I feel like they're backing away from pellets, and that sort of thing. I feel like corn and those baits are a bit better. I'd rather chuck double corn or a bomb and bread than I would a conquered pellet. But I get it. Absolutely. I get it because I know how good a method is. So, no, I'm going to say no, it's not something I would do. But my advice would be, if I was going to look at doing something like that, I would fish something very smelly but very fine. So it binded. I bet Thatcher's would be amazing for it, because Thatcher's is smelly, it's finely ground, it's sticky. Because what you wouldn't want is it coming off. Yeah. You'd obviously want it staying and being not nice and smelly. So I get it, but it's not something that, it's not my style, Jake, is what I'm going to say.
That's fair enough. And I think it's not too dissimilar concept to what Andy May's just done on a recent video on the channel of the pellet cone. It's something Andy May, it seems every single year, he goes, let's do a feature on the pellet cone and it'll be on everyone's channel. But he dragged me along, and I was watching him doing it, and I was thinking, like, if you were just fishing bomb and corn, bomb and pellet, whatever you were fishing, and you just thought, I just need a little bit of something around my hook bait, like just a bit more attraction. So easy to just use a pellet cone, slide some pellets down and chuck that out. And I suppose the conker's very, very similar in concept.
It is, and I'll tell you why I think that thing works so well, because this is how my brain works. You don't want loads of pellets and that in winter, right? If you chuck out a 30 gram ICS on the sill in winter, it'll disappear. Yeah. It's great when you chuck into an island, right? I bet you any money it's much better than a conker or a pellet cone if I was chucking to an island. But in open water, you chuck out, your bomb would sink into your sill and your hook bait would sit on the sill. Yeah. In the summer, you can use a big method feeder which doesn't bury into the sill, but you don't want to do that in the winter. So, I get it. I would say, if you're looking for a target hook bait to sit on top of the sill, pellet cone or the conker, as it was, would be a great option.
Excellent. Right. Hi Lee, what type of rod would you use to put ground bait out with? I was thinking using a spod rod. So this is from Mark, right? I believe what he's talking about here is a large quantity. So like if you're baiting up with a big bait up feeder, basically, what sort of rod do you need for that?
Yeah. I mean, we do a feeder rod, which I use. That's what I use, with some proper strong braid. Just on a 620 extremity, something that's never going to let me down. But I've got to be honest, the ICS system, you can put bait up feeders on the stems now, provided you've got strong mainline, like 8 pound or something like that. You can cast the biggest one. 6 pound, you'll still cast the smallest one, just gently. So it depends what I'm doing. If I'm putting like 10 great big feederfuls in, I would invest the money in a feeder rod or a spod rod and something like that to do it. But my advice would be the world's strongest braid. Like literally, I use Avid spod braid, which is, I could tow a car with it. It's that strong. Because you don't want something. I want snap to swivel before the braid snapped. So that's how strong it is, because it has to be. But if you're just chucking smaller feeders like a big cage, I'd just do it on my fishing rod. I always love to do it on my fishing rod because I feel I did it in Feeder Masters final. I felt like I wanted to be 100% that where I hit the clip and everything, and I was only putting like 3 or 4 in. So I just took my time and did it nice, because it was, whereas if I was going to put 10 in, then yeah, I'd be using a proper rod design for it without a doubt.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like, the feeders that you're going to use for that job, they're not in themselves aren't heavily weighted, are they? So it's generally, as long as you're careful and you're not ramming it full of, I don't know, if it's a huge feeder full of 8mm pellets, it's going to weigh some. But as long as you're sensible with the ground bait that you're putting in there and the sort of size of feeder, you can get away with the rod.
Yeah, just don't be snappy with your action. If you're ever chucking something that's really heavy, you've almost got to loop it. If I see people snatching it, that's how you could potentially break a rod, because effectively it goes so fast the rod just gives up, but I can't say I've ever broke a rod, but that's how I imagine a rod breaks.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, Richard Webb, can you tell me the difference between super feeder fish meal or a mix of F1 green and Thatcher's green?
Super feeder fish meal. Well, super feeder fish meal, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a bit like a green match method. Is that the one he's talking about?
Super feeder fish meal, if you were to get, so match method mix, you've got match method mix original, you've got match method mix dark. In match method mix dark, you're essentially taking the light natural coloured ingredients and replacing them for dark coloured ingredients. So whereas we would use an element of natural coloured expander in match method mix, it would be the dark expander, very similar, well, the same dark expander that you'd find in F1 dark. When it then goes to match method marine, an element of the mix that we use to make match method mix stickier goes from that ingredient to halibut pellets, because it's a marine halibut pellet. With super feeder fish meal, those same ingredients that we use to make one natural coloured, one dark, we replace with green ingredients. So it's very, very similar to match method mix. If another name for super feeder fish meal would essentially be match method mix green.
Yeah, but absolutely.
We created the super feeder mix to be a designated feeder mix. We thought, what's an amazing feeder mix that everyone uses? It was match method original. That already lives, so we decided super feeder fish meal was going to be essentially match method mix green.
Yeah, we tweaked it, didn't we, to make sure it was right for feeder fishing.
Yeah.
What did he compare it to there? Did he say F1 green and what?
And Thatcher's. So
it's not exactly the same, because it hasn't got the same ingredients that Thatcher's has got in it. But if you were doing, like, I'm going to say if you went 2 parts F1 green and 1 part Thatcher's green, you would be getting the same effect. That's a fair comparison. But it isn't the same, because Thatcher's itself has different specific fish meals added that make it Thatcher's. Yeah. So it is different, but essentially you get the same type of effect with that combination that he's asking about there.
Yeah, and
Thatcher's fish meal is a great mix.
And Thatcher's is a really interesting mix, because it's a really strong fish meal mix because of the specific fish meals in there, but it does have an element of cereal ingredients as well, like your breads, other bits that may be in some cereal mixes that were in the original Thatcher's mix, that sort of thing, because that's what's in there. So you would be adding an element of non-fish meal ingredients when you do add Thatcher's, but that's why it's such a good all-rounder for bream, skimmers, even roach love it, don't they? Even though it's one of the strongest fish meal mixes in our entire range.
It's a brilliant mix, Jake. Thatcher's is an amazing mix.
Luke, do ingredients in ground bait such as salt content come into it when deciding what mix to use in colder months?
Great question. I have learned that sweeter ingredients work well in colder months. I always find, like, things like, so you got to remember, like, fish meal in itself is salty, so I think that's why it tends to work quite well. That's why we created super feeder sweet fish meal with the salts and the sugars in. because, you know, ultimately in the colder months, there's been a big sway towards sugars and sweetness. I learned it from a few guys in Europe, you know, a few years ago now. They were piling it in, if I'm being honest. More in the colder months. They seem to think it had better effect in the colder months. Whether that's because in the summer their fish are less fussy, they just tend to eat everything. But, you know, I think the element of sweetness works really well in the colder months, where they may be looking for that a different taste, perhaps. I mean, we're not fish, so we don't know. But, yeah, that's why I am a big fan of that style of ground bait, and why Sweet Skimmer had the same. It had a lot of sweetness added into it because it was it was a mix that we were using a lot through the winter on a lot of natural venues. And without a doubt, in testing, the sweeter version was better. It was, you know, every time. So, you know, that's why we look for those sorts of things. So, yeah, I would look at that sort of thing. And, you know, bait boosters are very sweet. And that's often why I add bait boosters to my micros, for example. I use Scopex bait booster on my micros, you know, all the way through winter, because I believe then I've got a very sweet micro, which is what fish want to eat.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we've, obviously in the Sonu range, we've always sort of tweaked things as different types of mixes, but over the last sort of couple of years we've really looked into that, haven't we? The salt element, the sweet, like the extreme sweetness that you can get to go into certain products. Salt's something that in quite a few of the mixes last year we looked at, because we thought, well, we've got the standard fish meal mixes where we use great fish meals, great crushed pellets, all this, and we sort of looked and thought, well, we've not got that extremely salt, even in the natural range. So natural deep water, so natural Sweet Skimmer, both of them have a high salt content, where we thought, well, on natural venues, salt is such an important ingredient. But then also on the commercial side of things, Superfeed sweet fish meal, salted caramel ground bait.
And we did Power Scopex before, which is a very sweet mix. So, you know, we've played with that to fish meals, and people have seen amazing results. So, you know, it's I would certainly, Power Scopex is a beautiful ground bait for winter, because again, it's sweet, but it's very weak. It's a weak ground bait, you know.
Yeah, excellent. Let's have a look. Richard, is there ever a place for molasses or hemp in your ground bait when feeder fishing for bream?
No. I've got friends who like molasses, but just literally on what we've been talking about right then, I'm using mixes that are sweetened to how I want them to be, so I don't see the point. You know, if there was a molasses-based ground bait, then I would look at it, because it would achieve the same things. Molasses is just a sweetener, that's all it is. And people used to use it with brown crumb years ago, because it was a way of sweetening brown crumb. For me now, we're more advanced than that. You know, so Superfeeder sweet fish meal, which has, like I say, sugars and salt in, I don't need to do it. Hemp, I've never been a massive fan of hemp for bream, ever. I never think that they don't eat it. I just think that they prefer other things. So I won't, you know, you don't ever loose feed hemp on the canal and have somebody catch a net full of bream. So, you know, they clip, whereas if the guy next to you's fishing casters, he's got a great chance of catching some bream. So for whatever reason, roachy or hempy seed fish, and I think bream are more your scavengery, manky eating those sorts of things, and a bit of biscuit and that sort of thing. Really, they just don't. They haven't got a, let's call it a seed tooth.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Like, if the sort of chance of probability, that's not the saying, but the chances are at some point somebody fishing hemp out and out, firing in hemp, fishing a grain of hemp, would have a bag of bream if they loved it. Because at some point you'll land on him. But I don't think I've never heard of
I've never heard of it, Jay. No.
So they can't.
And it's different. It's different to sweet corn. Sweet corn is sweet. I mean, if you've ever tried hemp, it's very bitter, and it's just not. I just think it's a taste that bream aren't bothered by, so I never include it when I'm bream fishing.
Yeah.
I don't think fish are ever put off, but I just don't think you're feeding them anything by feeding them hemp.
I think they'll sit over it like on and commercials and things like that when you put a pot in and you fish meat or corn over the top, but they're there for the meat and the corn, and they'll sit over because there's a bed of something, and fish in general will sit over something to stop other fish sitting over it if that's the last thing available to them, sort of thing. So,
of course, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. John Harvey was meant to get the first one of these, but
was he?
He was, yeah, but we couldn't get a date, and I was at United last week, and then he said all evening, so I thought he was available at lunchtime.
You got a poor second in me.
Lee, if people not been to Tamar, what would you say is the ultimate skimmer mix? So at Tamar Lakes.
Listen, that a super feeder sweet fish meal is the mix created for Tamar. It was created for that. It was created for that type of fishing. John, that's my mix that I'm taking. It literally is straightforward as that. I know a lot of people who had a lot of success down there with those sorts of mixes. Who took that mix this year, and it formed a big part of what I did for the Feeder Masters final this year. So for me, super feeder sweet fish meal, just a brilliant go-to one bag mix for that sort of stuff. That would be my choice. I am a fan of things like match method and things that are a little bit coarser in certain situations, but I've got to be honest, when you're feeding a few micros, I just don't see the need. So when I'm fishing like with worms and casters and those sorts of bait, window feeders, cage feeders, it just takes some beating. So John, that's what you're taking. That's you done.
Good stuff. Steve Nellstrom, good afternoon, chaps. Congratulations, Lee, on a brilliant year.
Thank you.
Not done too bad, have you, this year?
Steady.
If you were fishing for small fish and skimmers on braid, would you fish direct or use a shock leader? If so, how long? Or what's your general rules on this sort of thing? Something I've asked you loads of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a converted braid direct man. I use 010 sinking absolute feeder braid, and then I have just getting delivery of it now, Jake.
A pallet full.
Just turned up. Sink absolute feeder braid. I'm thinking sinking feeder monos in my head. Then I use like an 018 or an 016 shock leader, just because I can't be bothered to change. I hate redoing rods. So literally, I've just got my rods in the garage with this 6 meters of 018, and then the rest is 010. Now I use that for any fish. I'm going to say 1.5 pounds and under. When I'm fishing for anything like over 1.5 pounds, I tend to use a mono shock leader, sinking feeder mono, 10 pound. But in the specific question there, I'm always focusing on braid direct, because I can pick up, I can be direct, and I'm using Ascension rods which are so soft in the top half that it's cushioning everything. I don't need the mono shocker. So with braid, I can literally see and feel and be in complete control of what's happening with my feeder, which is why I think it's so beneficial. And it's just something that I've done now, like I say, for pretty much everything. And even if I hook a 5 pound bream on it, it's no problem. I get it out easy. It's just that if I was fishing for only 5 pound bream, I would use a mono shock leader, because they're big fish, and why wouldn't you? You don't have to worry about seeing the bites and pull the rod in.
And what is 6 meters? You mentioned there 6 meters, even when it's a braid. Is 6 meters your go-to, whether it's braid or mono?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 6-7 meters. The rule is, if you've got the feeder in your hand here, after it's gone up the rod, you need 2 or 3 turns on the reel. Most rods, that's 6 meters, because even a 4 meter rod has got nearly a meter of handle. Yeah. So, Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
You're talking 6-7 meters. So I tend to give it 4 arm spans and then cut it off, then tie it on. By the time I've lost a little bit, I'm certainly not 2 meters tall. You're talking about 6-7 meters, and that's me. And it has been for a long time. Just having something industrial like that.
Yeah.
Dead easy, really.
Yeah. And is there an exception? So if you're fishing really short, do you then go to mono so you've got a bit of shock absorption? Like on the reel, that is, even, or not really?
No, it doesn't. I mean, take the venue you fish, the Gloucester Canal. You're never casting more than 25 meters for 99% of the time. But a 5-pounder on the Gloucester Canal that pulls your arm off, I don't really want to be hooking it braid direct. So I will fish with a mono shock leader if I was going fishing there.
Yeah.
If the Gloucester Canal was exclusively fish under 1.5 pounds, I'd be using braid direct. Yeah. Regardless if I was fishing at 2 meters or 22 meters, 50 meters, it doesn't matter. So, for me, it's braid direct for those size of fish, regardless of distance or at depth or anything.
Yep, fair enough. Ground bait for hybrid feeder in winter. Ground bait for hybrid feeder in winter. Ground bait type. Ground bait to water.
If the question's confusing you,
okay. Yeah, right. So you ground bait for hybrid feeder fishing, or method hybrid feeder fishing, and how are you mixing it? So what sort of ratio of water to ground bait? So essentially what I think Tony's getting at there is, do you look to mix it on the dry side so that you can compact it and it's still going to break out, or like some people might do, they might just think, it's ground bait, I always mix it in the same way, I just flood it, blah blah blah. How do you mix it? What are you looking for from the end result for ground bait when you're going to pack it into a hybrid feeder?
Tony, you're in luck. You are in luck, because me and Jake filmed an amazing video on ground bait with method style feeders about 2 months ago. It's been on YouTube for a good 6 weeks. Go and watch that video. It shows exactly how I do it, the quantities and everything else. A quick summary of that would be, I tend to go on the dry side. If you're going to fish a banjo style or a method style, I will usually go dry, which means I can nip it really, really hard, and it will go in and get down in impact and then open up. If you over wet a ground bait, it will not break down from a hybrid, from that style of fishing, right? So when I've got those like banjos, they haven't got any lips on them, so you have to squeeze it hard to make sure it goes down. So you can't afford to have an over wet ground bait. So go dry, and that will help you out. But go and look at that video, because I actually do 2 mixes on the day, show the exact quantities of ground bait and water. We mix it up by using dry sometimes, wet sometimes. And I mean, that day we were sort of skimmery F1 fishing, and it was brilliant. And so when ground bait is good, which, as I say in the video, pellets are my favoured choice. Most times I prefer pellets, but if ground bait is the one, which it can be, that's what you need to go and check out. And that's a rough guide. Go dry. The drier the better. Always err on the dry side, unless you understand when and how to cast it out. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's a great, like Lee said, a brilliant video to go and look at, because it shows it there in real time. What happens when you change and you go to the wetter mix, sticking in the feeder, or still some on the feeder when you wind it back, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's worth looking at. Do you ever use worm casts mixed with... Hi, have you ever used worm casts mixed with ground bait? If so, did it work well? Worm cast, is that basically like soil that worms have...
I thought the worm cast with the soil that gets mounded up on the grass when a worm digs in. I haven't got a clue what a worm cast is. I don't understand. I always thought that was those little lumps of soil when a worm dug itself back into the ground.
It could be. I'm not 100%. Dean, just let us know exactly what you mean there. Whether it's because I know that you can get basically the soil like what you'd use on a natural. It's almost like molehill, but like what the worms have actually lived in and passed through them, and they've been in it for years. Like. And so on. Dean, just let us know below if you're still there, just to basically.
Yeah, fill us in on that one. I'm interested in that one, Jake, because I can't say I've ever used it. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Hi guys, would Lee ever use F1 Dark over winter for silvers instead of Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal, and what is his reason for choosing either? Thanks.
Yeah, so look, F1 Dark is brilliant. It's a brilliant winter go-to ground bait. The thing that has always been with F1 Dark, and it's never been any different, it's very soft. It's a soft mix, so it doesn't bind particularly well. It's a great mix for Southfield Reservoir, for example, because it's 3 foot deep. If I was fishing on a very shallow commercial, just trying to think of an example, really, like Woodlands at Thirsk or the Oaks at Sesse or
Warren at Meadowlands.
Yeah, anywhere. Yeah, Warren on Meadowlands, anywhere there, great. Yeah, F1 Dark straight out of the bag, no problem. I've always been an F1 Dark and Thatcher's man, which meant I could bind it how I needed to. Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal has ingredients added to bind it, so therefore I can use it however I like. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, in the winter months, I'm passing that for a finer, like a pinky squat type sieve, just to take the chunkier bits of pellets out that are in there, because it's more of a spring summery base. So if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to riddle off your ground bait, I suggest you use F1 Dark and mix it with some Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal. That'll fine it down, but still allow it to bind. So that can work really well. It's something that I said I've brought F1 Green in a lot. So I'll use F1 Green with Super Feeder Sweet Fish Meal, just if I want to take a little bit of the food content out and also just weaken it a little bit. But at the moment, I'm not ready to do that. So I'm just sieving it off and using it straight from using it in its straight form, if you like. And that seems to get me the best results. But yeah, I mean, of course, F1 Dark will always be a brilliant ground bait.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. And like what Lee's saying there, as a standalone mix, F1 Dark's great. But if you try and feed it in the way potentially like we feed it, like little nuggets or like a ball, it will just break down because it's not got that binding element. And that is where the Thatchers and F1 Dark sort of thing came in, because Thatchers is stickier, it's finer, like it's really fine and sticky. So it just means that you can sort of play with your ground bait a little bit better when you've got Thatchers in there. But tweaking how much Thatchers, because sometimes you don't need the level of fish meal content, that sort of thing. So it's worth playing around. But F1 Dark as a go-to choice for winter silverfish or silverfish in general, whether it's on natural venues or commercial venues, is a brilliant mix.
Brilliant, absolutely, no doubt. And if I was looking for something really weak, Jake, I would replace Thatchers with, say, Sweet Skimmer and mix some Sweet Skimmer into my F1 Dark, and then I would get something that is sticky or a nicer consistency, but really on that weak side. It's something that we did at Hallcroft into December, January time, when it was you're fishing for 10 little skimmers. Weakened our ground bait down by just binding it up with a bit of Sweet Skimmer, you see.
Yeah. Lovely. Richard Webb, he heard a great question the other day, interested in your thoughts. Do you think bream ball up with the carp in winter?
Do I think bream ball up with the carp in winter? I don't know is the answer. I'm going to say that where I've been commercial silverfish fishing, I think that the carp don't. I think bream don't like carp. I feel like carp are aggressive. Whenever I catch a weight of bream, I don't catch any carp. Whenever I catch a couple of bream and then sit for no, and then it goes round with a carp, it tells me that carp and bream don't really want to mix. But I think the good areas of the lake are the good areas of the lake, and you will get bream and carp in that area. I think actively feeding, no, I don't think so. I think if you're catching bream, that's because there's no carp there. And if you're sitting and your bream aren't settled, that's because odd carp are coming in. That would be my observation from what I've seen. Is it generally in the same area? Yeah, you won't get the cold, shallow end of the lake being solid with bream because all the carp are in the deeps. Definitely not. They will all be in the preferred area, which is probably the deeps.
Yeah.
So, but often you'll find that the bream will migrate to the feed with more confidence than what carp will in winter. Carp just tend to just be where they want to be, whereas often bream will just sit and then come on the feed at a certain time. Whereas in winter you might never get a carp unless you chuck where they are. So that would be my observation really with those fish.
Yeah, I'd back you up on that one as well, to be fair. Oh no, you know what we've gone and done?
Go on.
We've gone and done our live at the same time as Joe's done a live.
No, we haven't.
We have. I've absolutely done him.
Oh,
he's probably got all our viewers, to be fair. Joe's been doing an odd live quite regular.
Oh, right. Is Joe not out filming today? Are they not doing it? Is Joe doing his own live? Is he lunchtime live, is he?
I'm not 100% sure. I've chatted to Joe yesterday, and he didn't mention it, but he doesn't always. He sometimes does like an impromptu, I'm just going to go live, unless...
Yeah, I think they were going to go filming today, but I think the weather's put them off, so it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, maybe that's the case.
I think he's gone for his lunchtime live.
Yeah. So, but saying that, I did a pre-warning.
Once you've watched our live, go and watch Joe's live. It's fantastic.
That's the thing. Our live it'll be on the channel. Joe's will be on ears. We've got no problems with you going and watching Joe because he's a good mate of both of us.
Sure is.
The Shadow. Would you flavour normal supermarket sweet corn with something sweet? Also, what mix of water to ground bait for mixing do you find work best?
I'm not a massive fan of the supermarket sweet corn. You could do, I suppose, but it generally tends to be sweet so you can eat it. You could do. I'm not something I'm into. I just like sweet corn as it is. I've got to be honest, I use F1 corn from Sonubaits anyway, which is in a sweet water, so it's a bit softer than normal corn from the supermarket, which I think massively helps hookups, and no doubt the fish love it, so I tend to use that anyway. But I suppose you could do with the supermarket corn.
I suppose if you've got like the liquid flavours in your bag and you were thinking, well, I don't want to pay the little bit more for F1 corn, but I still want essentially F1 corn, there's no reason why you can't give it a squirt of F1 flavour, because then if you're using supermarket sweet corn anyway, you've got the flavour, it won't harm, will it? So
you're totally right, mate. It's 100% what I would be doing. Yeah, no doubt.
And then when it comes to ground bait, what do you find as a sort of ratio? What's like your go-to? We, as a company, we say a pint for every kilo of ground bait is generally like a starting point.
Right.
But what would you say?
Yeah, I think that's you're not far wrong. I would say, I think with most fish meal ground baits, it's about 1 to 4, 1 to 5, I think. So if you wanted to err on the side of caution, maybe put like say 5 pints of dry ground bait in a bucket and a pint of water. That would be a good kick-off. It depends what you want it for. I've got to be honest, I always mix my ground bait slightly dry to start with, and then look at what I'm going to do with it. But if you were fishing down the edge, you'd want like 3 to 1.
Yeah, and it does massively depend on what's in your ground bait, because if it's a massive expander base, so like for example Super Crush expander, you can almost get away with like the same. It is ever so slightly less water than ground bait, but because that is 100% crushed expander that is essentially a sponge, it'll just absorb everything. You flood it looks flooded, but then it just goes, well, if you do a 2 kilo bag of Super Crush expander, your bucket's overflowing by the end of it. So you've got to look at what mix you're using, because if it's got a lot of crushed expander in it, it's going to take more water than something that doesn't have so much expander in it. That's
right, absolutely right. And I would, like I say, for that general guide, err on the side of caution. Half of it. Sonubaits come in 2 kilos. If you emptied half of it in and put a pint of water in, you wouldn't be far away for an initial kick-off, and then see what you want it for and how you're using it and take it from there. Just be careful. If it's overly dry, ground baits will have a habit of coming back up to the top, so make sure they've got enough water soaked in them to do what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Afternoon, Lee. Have you given Rob a butt grip yet after his rod got pulled in, and how many different outfits do you have in your wardrobe?
Right, it's an interesting. Who's asked me that question? That's great.
That is Randolph.
Oh, excellent. Cheers, Randolph. Have I given Rob a butt grip? No. I mean, nobody likes to see that, Jake, do they? Nobody likes to see him get pulled in.
Other than when it's Rob.
Yeah, apart from when it's Rob, and then everybody likes to see it. It was fantastic. Serves him right for not having one. How many outfits? Flipping heck. Well, I've got my Sonu, my Preston, and my England clothes, and then just every now and again I'll put a t-shirt, But no, apart from that, just live in fishing clothes. They're boring, aren't
they? Saying that, I saw you in your was it the Joker outfit you were in the other night?
This is it, Jay. People think that I'm boring, don't do anything, don't they? What was the best thing about my Joker outfit on Halloween was we got in from trick-or-treating and I didn't have time to get changed to go take Ben to football. So I took Ben to football in the Joker outfit.
Nice.
And that would have been great, apart from the fact that no other parents did. So I felt a little bit out of place,
you were that guy.
Oh, was that guy? It made better that my wife came with me as well as Harley Quinn, so that was hilarious.
Yeah, which was great. You're just
sat there and watched son might play football. So.
Nice. I love it. I saw that. I thought it was great, to be fair. Mark Summers, on which occasions would you use a feeder link? Most of your videos just show a snap link. So when do you just have a snap link up your line, and when do you use an actual feeder link?
Yeah, I always put a link on, Mark, because what I tend to do is add a piece of line to the feeder to create a link. I am enjoying using a link when I go fishing on a big match and I know what feeders I'm going to be using. I'll often put a link on my line, but whenever I'm a bit like not really sure, I just add a link with a piece of doubled up thick line. Now the general rule on links are, if I'm skimmer fishing, I tend to go for like 2 inches, so that's 5 centimeters. That's to create a bit of movement, watch the bite develop, and then obviously often it'll hook itself, or you can read that. When I'm roach fishing, where a lot of your bites are fast and rattly, I'll double the length of that link, which is why I'm not always a massive fan of having it on the line unless I know specifically what I'm doing. So take window feeders, for example. I literally just got a spool of 10-pound line in my box, and I'll double up a piece of line, clip it on the link, and that allows me to monitor it. Anything over about £2, I just use a feeder straight on the line. When we fished the European Feeder Cup at Barston last week, big bream, big F1s, big carp, I literally clip the feeder straight on the line, because your rods are great big bites of great big toe rounds or drop backs. So I don't believe it's anything to do with tangles or your rig. It's all about your bite indication. But that I've given you there, £2 and over, don't really need a link. Any sort of skimmery type fish, anything that's in that like 6 ounce to 2 pound bracket, a short link of 2 inches, nice. When you're fishing for fish 6 ounce and under, the longer link's definitely better, like a 4-inch link. So that's my general guide. It serves me pretty well, to be fair, which is why I just have that snap swivel on the line.
Brilliant. Right, what is your go-to ground bait abroad for skimmers and bream, slow-moving canal? So you're going to have to think of an example when you've been overboard on a slow-moving canal, and which of our mixes is best suited to that sort of venue?
Well, the deep water mix is literally a mix designed for exactly that. So deep water is a mix that binds nicely. It has bread, biscuit, those sort of contents in it. It's non-fish meal. It's dark. It ticks all the boxes for me. Sweet skimmer is finer and stickier. So if I want to, my rule of thumb is if I want deep water to be stickier and bind more and carry more bait, I add sweet skimmer. If I want it to be a bit softer and a faster breakdown, I add a bit of brown crumb, our back brown crumb. So that gives me the best of both. River can do that as well. Our river ground bait, So Natural River, that can help break your ground bait down as well. But if I was just taking one mix, it would be deep water. A lot of people, they love combining a mix, but I've got to be honest, we try so hard to get our mixes right. That deep water, anything from 6 to 12 foot, which I think covers a lot of canals, I would literally just use that straight from the bag. And you're going to be onto a winning mix. It's a mix I've used on all canals wherever I've been, Gloucester, for example, for a long time. Obviously, sometimes I'm in a different situation with a team that has a different agreement, but I know my choice is always that deep water because it's something that I've gone to. So for me, where I've got the choice, it's always that.
Yeah, and I will say there, like you just mentioned there, sometimes when you're away with a team, like the team has certain things. Deep water is based around popular mixes that in those situations teams have used in the past, and that is why we thought we don't have that sort of mix. The dark, salty, sticky that's going to be good in deeper water, carry bait, which has got the bready and biscuit element, sweet but like the salty element in there as well, that appeals to a bit of all species, whether it's roach, skimmers, bream, hybrids. We felt like that wasn't in our range. We know that people use those sorts of mixes, so that's why that got added in there. So yeah, and that is generally what goes through in our thinking, doesn't it?
It nicely with that as well as we tweaked it, because some of those mixes are a bit too sticky.
Yeah.
And ours has been tweaked so it isn't. So it's bang on that. Deep water as it is, great stuff.
Yep. Randolph's come back and said he is genuinely a Batman for a living. I would guess it's not a Batman impersonator. By the way he's put a Batman, I'm guessing he goes and gets bats if they're living in people's lofts and things like that. That's what I would guess reading that.
But whatever you like.
Andrew Bailey, hi Lee. Are the ingredients in Sonubaits ground bait similar to other brands, as they seem to have similar smells?
Yeah, look, you can't go massively different with ground baits. So take, for example, you've just named one, Jay, crushed expanders. Crushed expanders is crushed expanders. The difference is at Sonu from day one, because we order such large quantities of pellets, we dictate the ingredient within the expanders. So, we've had times like early doors, they'll go, we've got these expanders, and you get them, and they don't bind properly, they don't sink properly. They're just not good. So I always laugh when I see pure crushed expander from somebody else. I think, well, yeah, you've had to set your own ingredients for the expander, because a normal off-the-shelf expander crushed up just won't work. So, that's what we do. So yeah, they're gonna be similar, because ultimately expanders that are wheat and fish meal based, that's what you're gonna get. And it's no different with So Natural ranges, breads, biscuits, salt, sugars. Those things smell similar, and they're all things that you could go and have a go at yourself, but it's flipping time consuming, and you don't know what's tried and tested for the percentages. So the beauty of what we're doing at Sonu is we combine the things and then get the guys to use them to make sure that when you're out on the bank, if you're picking up Superfeeder sweet fish meal, it's going to be a nice sticky mix with the right amount of salts and sugars and blah blah and that in. And if you're using F1 dark and I'm saying, it's a soft mix, don't just take it steady with that, it's the same sort of thing. So they are going to smell similar, because that's what crushed fish meal smells like. So But yeah, that's the difference at Sonu. Try to combine value and knowledge into the product that we've got, and it's obviously works very well for a lot of people. So yeah, that's where we're at.
And that that particular example, when it's a crushed expander and it's somebody or whoever, that is like an ingredient in a bag, so that you can't make it that much difference. When it comes to our green pellets, our red pellets, our black pellets, they're tailored to us. So we ask them, this is how much of this we want in, this is how much of this. So our green pellet will be different, and same with every pellet we use. But when it comes to an expander, you're getting an expander sort of thing. So yeah, but like Lee says, different mixes have been tweaked in different ways. We've worked hard to do that, and that's where you get your differences. The knowledge that many years of angler knowledge and the people working there know what they're doing. P.S. Andrew Bay, P.S. loved your first coaching day at Barston with you, so he was one of your guys there. Mike Smith, hi Lee, I'm a big fan of braid straight through when feeder fishing, but I'm struggling to find a tangle free sliding rig. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I think I use 2 of the Preston stops, the rubber stops on my line. That helps it sit away. I also use a thick line beneath it, so I have at least 40 centimetres of thick either fluorocarbon if I've got a knot, or just the same 8-pound line that the things are running on. If you're trying to put light lines on next to your feeder, then you can struggle. The feeder links we talked about earlier, having some sort of separation from your main line and your feeder is important. You try and put a window feeder on your line directly, you will get a tangle. So having a separation from your feeder to the main line is important. But look, on the Press Innovations YouTube channel, I've done a feeder rigs video at the start of this year on YouTube. There's ones from the past. Check them out. Honestly, they are my rigs, and they are my biggest piece of advice is don't try to be clever and add things into the line like little swivels and all that jazz. You want the line and a stop and some more thick line, and then it's very hard to get tangled. Make sure on the cast you're hitting your clip so everything kicks past. You should be good to go. Just avoid the gumph, and then you should be okay. Yeah,
one of the biggest things I've took, and the rig I use for the majority, is the simplest rig that you could ever do, and it's something you showed me, where it is just, if you're fishing braid direct, you've just got a short bit of mono or whatever it is. If it's not braid direct and you've got a longer shot leader, it's the same, but it's literally snap link swivel up your line, 2 stops on your line, loop to loop connection for your hook length, and however long a hook length that you want. And I tie everything to a foot. You use shorter, don't you? You go 6 inches, but I just know all of my hook lengths are a foot for feeder fishing or waggler fishing, so they're the same stuff. And therefore I can just go slide me stops up the line, and if I want a 3-foot drop, I can have a 3-foot drop. If I want a 2-foot drop, all I'm moving is them 2 stops, and that's your rig that you showed me, other than the slight differential in what length of hook length we actually use.
Yeah, and that's brilliant up to about 30 metres, and in excess of 30 metres I have those 2 rubber stops sat behind a knot so they can't slide on the big cast. But the principle is exactly the same.
Lovely. Stephen Carrington, we're getting towards the end of the questions. We've been on over an hour now, so we'll start to wrap up anyway. But last few questions. Stephen Carrington, would you say there's an optimum distance to chuck at Meadowlands?
Meadowlands? Yeah, I would. Close to the bank. Do not. If you're a fish in Meadowlands, if you want to feed, you come to the anglers. If you don't want to feed, you go off into the middle. So if you're looking for a rogue fish early out in the middle, any time after that, maximum 15-18 meters maximum, because all the fish are where the bait goes, and that's where the bait goes. So for me at Meadowlands or any big lake, that is always the case.
Just I'm going to jump in because I'm there next Wednesday. Even on the shallow bank on the far side.
I'm there next Wednesday as well, mate, so no.
You're not telling me. Eugen is saying hi from Romania to both of us. Hello.
Hello.
Andrew Pearson, hi lads, what hook length do you use for bomb and bread in winter?
I have the same setup as what we've talked about there. So I have my stops. I always start with 8-inch. For me, 8-inch is a lovely clear of the bottom style amount. I will sometimes extend that to a foot if I think the bottom's really soft, or I think that the lake's really deep and I want something a little bit higher. But generally speaking, on most commercials, 8-inch for bomb and bread is the optimum popped up off the bottom. And I only know that because when I used to dob bread on the pole, 8-inch off bottom was like the best. So it made sense to me to do the reverse for your bomb and bread. So I think the only time it's longer is if I'm chucking a bomb into silt and it's going a couple of inches into the bottom. I might make it longer to try and maintain that 8-inch off bottom.
Brilliant. And just on that, what do you find, a lighter bomb or a heavier bomb is better?
I think without a doubt heavier bomb. A bomb and bread, the fish has got to hook itself. Basically, as they suck in, they shake their head and you get that drop back. If you've got a light bomb on the initial head shake, if it doesn't set the hook, it'll go, and when you pick up, it'll be thin air. Whereas if you've got a heavy bomb, you'll actually watch the rod go like that, and then when you strike, actually the fish has already got the point of its in its mouth. So minimum for me is 30 grams minimum on any bomb and breading, even if I was chucking 10 meters.
Lovely. Mark Walton, would Lee only use loop-to-loop connections for feeder fishing, or would he use those small little swivel type, the sleeve? And
I'm not using the small little swivel type thing in my rig at all. No chance, because he's just asking for a tangle.
Yeah, and I back Lee up on, obviously, Lee, just for my point on a feeder fishing. But yeah, I just think if you're adding things like that, they are great, they can be brilliant. If you're swapping hook lengths, brilliant. But I think if you're adding little elements like that in, you're asking for something else in your rig to potentially tangle.
That's where tangles come from, without doubt.
Right, and last question, Hans Faulkner, when taking, say, 2 rods ready-made to a venue, what tips would you use for 30 metres, say, because you don't know if it's wind? Right, so this is the age-old question. If you've set up your rod before you've gone fishing, Hans hasn't said if it's carp, silverfish, that sort of thing. How do you decide what's the go-to in the tip?
Right, and this is it. This is the go-to tips, right? 10-foot rod is a 1 ounce tip. 11-foot rod is 1.5 ounces. 12-foot rod is 2 ounce, and your 13-foot rod is 3 ounce. They are the tips in my rod. The only time they ever change is when I go to a venue and I am practicing at the venue for any length of time, 2-3 days. And let's just say on the 12-foot rod, it turns out that I'm fishing for little roach and I need a slightly more sensitive tip. Then I will try it in practice and maybe adjust it. But I can, in 100 fishing situations, 98 times out of 100, I will have the tips in the rod I have just told you then. And I tailor that, because tips are different, A 1 ounce tip that is fast taper is different to a slow taper tip. That's up to you. You need to understand your own tips to know what you are. But if you've got rods, 10-foot 1 ounce, 11-foot 1.5 ounces, 12-foot 2 ounce, and 13-foot 3 ounce, that, if I opened my garage door, is exactly what I would have in all my rods ready to go.
Lovely. We're going to go one more because Lewis has sneaked in.
Tuck him in, Jake.
When bream fishing, do you prefer fishing longer hook lengths or fish? Right. When bream fishing, do you prefer fishing a longer, thin hook length or fish the leader up and attach a ready tied hook length? Right, Lewis. When bream fishing, do you prefer fishing a longer, thin hook link or fish the leader up the leader and attach a short, ready tied hook length?
Okay, what I'm going to say, I'll have a go at it, right? So I only ever use a short hook length anyway. I'll use a short hook length with a breaking strain to suit what I want on my rig. If you're asking how long my hook length would be for bream fishing in general, I would it's all about the colour of the water. So do not think for 1 second if you put a 6 foot hook length on, your hook bait lands 6 foot away. It doesn't. It lands next to the feeder. Your feeder goes down, the hook length comes straight down behind it, regardless of how long it is. Okay? And it lands within a 30 centimetre circle of that feeder every time. The reason a long hook length works is because when you chuck out, as the hook length's coming down in the clear water, it gives the fish more time to see your hook bait. So in Ireland, for example, a long hook length is always better because the water is clear, the feeder hits the bottom, the fish come in, and as they come in, there's your hook length bait coming down, and they get it, and your bites all come relatively quickly. What you've got to remember is it takes a long time for your hook length to hit the bottom, a good 30 seconds if it's a long hook length. And not only that, it also can catch an eye of a fish. It'll come down. Am I going to eat that? Am I not? I know that from roach fishing. When I lower my rig in, often you'll lower your rig in, and like 10 seconds later you'll get the bite. You think, well, I'll just put it in as quick as possible, and you have to wait 2 minutes for a bite. They do watch the bait and almost like, go on then, I'm thinking about it. So when it's coloured, or the more coloured it is, take Southfield for an example, it's pointless having a long hook length at Southfield because it's coloured. The fish come by at hook length. I only ever fish the minimum allowed, which is 50. I usually set it at 55 just so nobody asks me any questions, and that's me. And when I see people using a long hook length, I think, no, that's not getting you any advantage whatsoever because effectively the fish aren't seeing it. So it doesn't land further away. They're not backing off your feeder. Keep with your, use that as your guide, and I hope the other bit answered your thinner type question.
Excellent. Right, we are going to wrap it up there because we've been on for an hour and 10 minutes, which I think is a lovely amount of time for a nice lunchtime catch-up, impromptu. I do think that this is something that we're going to start doing regular, especially with the winter coming and some cooler weather.
Brilliant.
I think it's a nice format to get everybody involved and some questions fired over, so I think we'll do this.
Yeah, we like to do it as well, Jake, over on the Edge website. We try to do things like this, and we will do it.
Shameless plug over here.
Oh, I thought I was chucking it in. Just chucking it in.
Yeah, fair play. So yes,
I just get me signed.
Yeah, and over here you'll. Right, so we'll end it there.
I think they're good, don't you? Because they give people a chance to interact. You know, obviously, like I said, Joe's doing one over there today. Give people a chance to interact with us and ask questions. So, guys, get involved. If you ever sit and watch, honestly, there's no such thing as a stupid question. We'll always have a go at answering it. So go for it. I'm off to watch Joe's now.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will catch you on the next one.